Bruce Wayne, the Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader. Thank you for watching this Comic Power special report about the 80th anniversary of the Batman. On the Mount Rushmore of comic book characters stands Superman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man, and of course, the Batman. He is by far the most popular comic book character ever created. Historically, we still have to start with Superman. His first appearance in Action Comics #1 in 1938 is such a success, it ushers in the golden age of comics. So the company that would become DC is looking for more cheap talent from young up-and-coming illustrators and writers. One of those is Bob Kane, who has a character called the Batman. This character makes his debut in Detective Comics #27 in May of 1939. Let's go ahead and address some of the controversy. That Bob Kane was overcredited for creating Batman, and Bill Finger, who helped develop the character, was undercredited. The historical record is showing us that Bob Kane wanted a Batman that looked like this, but Bill Finger redesigned the character to look like this, and we're lucky that Bill's design won out because this Batman would have not made it. Some justice is being served now, and Bill Finger has been elevated to a co-creator of Batman. And decades after his death, he's being properly honored. The Batman character is heavily influenced by The Shadow, a vigilante who goes out at night and fights crime, first introduced in the 1930 radio show. Batman is also heavily influenced by Zorro, another masked vigilante, first appearing in 1919. Batman is also influenced by the flying apparatus that was designed by Leonardo da Vinci in his drawings. These drawings are 500 years old. You can see how they have a big influence on the cape of Batman. The iconography of Batman is very well known. His real name is Bruce Wayne. Both of his parents are killed after a robbery that went wrong in the movie theater. That inspires him to become a vigilante later in life called the Batman. There's the Batcave, the Batmobile, his trusted butler, Alfred Pennyworth, his teenage sidekick, Dick Grayson, aka Robin. His arch enemy is the Joker. He's tempted by Catwoman, and when all else fails, Commissioner Gordon shines the bat signal over Gotham City to call on the Batman. Not only is it the 80th anniversary of Batman, it's the 30th anniversary of his blockbuster 1989 movie starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. We'll go over the movies in detail in a minute, but we want to start in the 1930s and dispel some myths about Batman. And one of those myths is that Batman doesn't carry a gun, but you can see here that he used to. Another myth is that Batman doesn't kill, but you can see here that he's snapping somebody's neck from the counter. And then says he's probably better off this way. I know he's a Dark Knight, but man, that's hardcore. Somehow, some way, the Batman character went from a gun-toting, neck-snapping Dark Knight vigilante and morphed into a 1960s campy television show. He morphed into a campy movie series in the late 1990s again, and then came back to his darker roots in the 2000s, and here we are today. So let's explore the 1940s. In April of 1940, in Detective Comics #38, they introduced Robin, his sidekick, and as America enters World War II, Batman, like other comic book characters, is used as a propaganda tool to support the war. By the 1950s, the war effort is over. There's talk that comics create bad behavior in kids, so the Comics Code Authority is created, and it makes comics in the 1950s as bland as possible. Science fiction and space travel becomes big in popular culture, so Batman follows this trend as well, and it looks just bad. You know Deadshot from the Suicide Squad? When he first was introduced, he looked like this. This is What is this? At this point, DC had canceled most of their superhero titles due to lack of sales, but the holy trinity of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman continue because they're still selling very well, but they're not very good at all. That brings us to the 1960s, and the biggest event that decade is the television show starring Adam West as the lead character. Oh boy. It runs from 1966 to 1968. We are as far away from the Dark Knight as possible. This is downright buffoonery. I mean, the characters dancing the Watusi and doing all types of silly stuff. The show does get some strong performances from some of the villains, like Burgess Meredith as the Penguin, Cesar Romero as the Joker, and Frank Gorshin as the Riddler. There are 3 different actresses that play the role of Catwoman, but Eartha Kitt is the one that's most remembered. The Batman TV show spawned the Batman movie, which is the worst thing ever made. The scene where he's trying to get rid of the bomb is just ridiculous, and the scene where he fights off that shark, the most fake looking shark in the world, by the way, I don't know what to say. So at this point in this character's history, he's not known for looking like this, but known for being a buffoon that looks like this. DC Comics smartly decides to rehabilitate the image of the character in the comics and return him to a darker character. It's written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by the superstar iconic Neil Adams. Neil kills off the cartoony look and gives us a more realistic looking style. Neil's style becomes a big influence on other legends like George Perez and John Byrne, by the way. Neil's drawing style and this darker edge brings some more legitimacy back to Batman throughout the 1970s. That brings us to the 1980s, and the character gets another boost of huge popularity when he's handed over to Frank Miller, who gives us The Dark Knight Returns, one of the best stories ever written in the history of comic books, and tells the story of an older, grizzled Batman. He winds up creating a suit of armor, and with some kryptonite, he winds up kicking Superman's butt. Of course, this miniseries was a big influence on the Batman vs. Superman movie in 2016. That brings us to the 1989 movie that I mentioned earlier. It's directed by Tim Burton, who's known for his darkness, so who better? He ditches the Robin character altogether and gives us a soundtrack produced by Prince. My favorite song on here is probably Scandalous. It's a very good movie. It holds up pretty good, by the way. The movie makes about $411 million. Adjusted to inflation, that's about $857 million, which is a very healthy box office. And that brings us to the 1990s, and in 1992, Batman Returns drops. And once again, Tim Burton is directing and Michael Keaton returns as Batman. Michelle Pfeiffer plays Catwoman and she steals the show. To this day, this is probably still the best rendition of this character, in my humble opinion. The big bad of the movie is the Penguin, played by Danny DeVito. The film goes on to make $266 million. Adjusted to inflation, that's about $486 million, which is only about half of what the first Batman brought in. So the parent company, Warner Brothers, isn't exactly happy. In addition, there's some controversy. There's some angry parents and some pissed off corporate sponsors that didn't like the rendition of the Penguin. Their interpretation of the Penguin was Burgess Meredith's version on the Batman TV show, but Tim Burton's version is this hideous looking penguin. So with all these complaints and the box office drop, Tim Burton is forced out as director, and Michael Keaton wisely decides to step down as Batman since Tim Burton isn't there. Warner Brothers puts the Batman franchise in the hands of Joel Schumacher, who is nothing but a complete tool. He takes Warner Brothers' directive and gets rid of the darkness of the Frank Miller and Tim Burton variety and restores the campy Batman. This is that awful period of Batman in the 1990s, which can be summed up by the picture of this guy. Yeah, it was that bad. So in 1995, we get Batman Forever with Val Kilmer taking over as Batman. Chris O'Donnell plays Robin, Tommy Lee Jones plays Two-Face, and Jim Carrey overacts playing the Riddler. It's a very forgettable movie. The only thing worth watching in it is Uma Thurman playing Poison Ivy. It does better financially than the previous film, making $366 million at the box office. Adjusted to inflation, that's about $615 million. These improved numbers do nothing but embolden Warner Brothers to go even campier. So in 1997, we get the worst superhero movie of all time probably, and Batman Forever. I could do a whole video about how bad this movie is. Their uniforms have bat nipples. Alicia Silverstone phones it in as Batgirl. She's just flat. For some reason, they hired George Clooney to play Batman, and he pulls out a bat credit card and says, "Never leave the cave without it." This actually happened. And the worst thing ever, Arnold Schwarzenegger is Mr. Freeze, giving us one bad pun after another. Everybody chill. It makes about $238 million. Adjusted to inflation, that's about $378 million today. Not only is the box office drop, it's a critical travesty. So Warner Brothers gives up and stops making Batman films for just a while anyway. That brings us to the 2000s, and Warner Brothers decides to try to repair the damage they've done to Batman and put him in the hands of Christopher Nolan, who's riding high off his psychological thrillers. British method actor Christian Bale is selected to play Batman. And in 2005, we get Batman Begins, and it gives us a side we've never seen of Batman about how he got his training. The movie makes $374 million at the box office. Adjusted to inflation is $495 million. So the box office is just okay, but it's a critical success. We get great performances from the Scarecrow, and Liam Neeson gives us a very strong performance. And that brings us to 2008, and we get The Dark Knight, possibly the best comic book movie of all times, and the first one to make $1 billion, the first one to have someone win an Oscar in the acting category with Heath Ledger as the Joker, making it hard for anyone to ever play the character ever again. Remember, this is 2008, so adjust the $1 billion at the box office to about $1.2 billion. That brings us to the 2010s. And let's switch over to the comics a little bit. And in 2011, DC decides to reboot all of their comics, which is dubbed the New 52. So the new Batman comes out, and it's the first reboot back to #1 since 1940. The creative team of Greg Capullo on the art and Scott Snyder is Eisner worthy, and the sales are phenomenal. So in terms of the comics and the movies and everything else, Batman has never been more popular. Nolan completes his trilogy in 2012 with The Dark Knight Rises. Tom Hardy stars as the big bad of this movie playing Bane. It's not as loved as the previous movie, but then again, what is? And it also makes $1 billion at the box office. With inflation, $1.1 $1 billion. As you are aware, Marvel Studios scores with Iron Man in 2008 as well. Disney buys Marvel in 2009 and gives them the platform to foresee their vision of the connected universe, leading up to the Avengers making $1 billion in 2012. Once Nolan's trilogy is done, DC decides to counter and makes their first connected movie a Superman movie, which is polarizing and doesn't quite make as much as they'd like at the box office. DC looks around and sees how far they are behind Marvel, takes about 3 years off to try to get it right, and gives us Batman vs. Superman. It gives us elements of The Dark Knight from Frank Miller and Injustice. It does not get the critical success of the box office they're looking for, and it's probably the most polarizing movie ever made to this day. The Batman character appears in 2017's Justice League with Ben Affleck reprising his role, and it's a complete train wreck. Zack Snyder leaves the project after the death of his daughter, although rumors say that he was fired before that. Josh Whedon comes in and tries to fix the film, but nothing can fix this mess, so all the other things they want to do with the connected universe are shelved. At the time I made this video, Walter Hamada has been hired to be the president of DC Films, and he's focusing on standalone movies. And Ben Affleck is officially out as Batman. So are we at another one of those low points for Batman? I don't think so. It's more like a speed bump. In the comics, Batman is handed over to a new up-and-coming writer named Tom King, and it's still an Eisner-worthy comic. They do an animated movie on the Killing Joke storyline from Alan Moore, and it's well received. The Batman prequel show Gotham is also well received on television. And in the movies, Batman is handed over to Matt Reeves, who's going to do a story called The Batman. At the time I make this video, no actor has been chosen for the lead role, but it's supposed to come out in about 2021. That brings us to the speculation pick of the week. And that's going to be Detective Comics 1000. Just like Superman last year when he turned 80 years old, DC produced variant covers on Action Comics 1000, inspired for every decade that he's been published. They're doing the same thing for Batman. So cover A was drawn by Jim Lee and Scott Williams. And here's the rest. There's a 1930s inspired variant by Steve Rude, which looks like this. There's a 1940s inspired variant by Bruce Timm, which looks like this. A 1950s inspired variant by Michael Cho, which looks like this. A 1960s inspired variant by Jim Steranko, which looks like this. A 1970s inspired variant by Bernie Wrightson, which looks like this. A 1980s inspired variant by Frank Miller, which looks like this. A 1990s inspired variant by Tim Sale, which looks like this. A 2000s inspired variant by Jock, which looks like this. And a 2010s variant by Greg Capullo, which looks like this. And of course there's a blank variant so you can get some custom work done on it. Once again, happy 80th birthday to the Dark Knight. Some people think that I'm a Marvel homer, but Batman is actually my favorite character of all time. The character has had its highs and it's had its lows, but at the end of the day, I guess that just means there's an interpretation of the Batman for everyone. I apologize that I didn't talk enough about the animated series and the other television shows. If I did, we'd be here about 2 hours, and I just don't have time for that. So thank you for watching this special report about the Batman from Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power. You know the drill. Subscribe to this channel, give it a thumbs up, and share these videos on social media so others learn about the channel. And don't forget, I do sell comics at my eBay page listed here. One Stop Thrift and Comic Power are ran by the same guy. That would be me, Comic Killer 72. I am 100% feedback, by the way. Once again, thank you to all my subscribers and viewers who support Comic Power. Until next time, this is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power saying bye-bye.